Is there really a viable approach for poverty eradication? One of the many stated goals of our foundation is the eradication of poverty. While it may not be realistic to presume that poverty will ever be completely eliminated, it is feasible to believe and to act in such a way so as to understand that it is, in fact, possible to reduce poverty to nothing more than a statistical anomaly. Statistical anomaly, also known as an outlier, is a data point that lies far outside the range of values typically observed in the data set. It can be identified using various statistical techniques such as calculating z-scores, examining residuals, or using interquartile ranges. In our particular case, the statistical anomaly merely indicates that the numbers of impoverished persons would ultimately remain below 5% of the population, more or less. There will inevitably be some individuals who may be mentally challenged, among others, who elect to live outside of the traditional societal norms and structures, no matter their personal reasoning or whatever, their cause for doing so may be, and others who may remain economically impoverished, but who remain the exception rather than the norm. For all too many people, poverty has become and remained a curse, often expanding across multiple generations, reaching out and robbing people of any remaining vestiges of hope for any kind of better future. Despite some rather optimistic, if not poorly informed ideas and opinions to the contrary, I don't know what that was all about. Providing the homeless with homes or merely handing them food and a paycheck every month, devoid of any kind of responsibility, any hint of responsibility, will only make the problems worse, exacerbating the underlying conditions, further increasing the spread of poverty through the creation of a dependency class, and encouraging others to fall into what, for some at least, will become nothing more than a comfortable rut from which they are never quite capable of fully extracting themselves, leading in some cases to entire families being both literally and figuratively left out in the cold. The only viable solution is a comprehensive and systemic approach that simultaneously addresses both the immediate symptoms of poverty, such as access to the basic necessities of life, education, housing, food, etc., and even access to modern amenities, in addition to a program that addresses the underlying causes of poverty in conjunction with the programs to allow the formerly vulnerable members of society to actively engage in society as productive and contributing members within their societal structures. In the case of our foundation, this program includes a multitude of options and requirements for participants within foundation programs, as well as for all the beneficiaries and recipients of assistance altogether. Among the most notable of these in terms of this content is the provision of scholastic, technical, and vocational training for both adults and the children. Realistically, however, none of these programs have the capacity to function without the inclusion of the necessary tools and, more important still, paid employment opportunities for the formerly vulnerable members of society. The foundation-owned commercial ventures, as established, will not be wholly dependent upon the traditional for-profit model, though they will ultimately need to generate a positive return if they are to be beneficial and to provide tangible benefits for the individuals and communities whom they are tasked with serving. This, again, is addressed within the weighted voting system, which not only prevents the corporations from merely tossing all their earnings back into their own personal growth and expansion, forsaking the needs of the people, but also prevents the foundation and people from introducing programs which would inhibit the capacity of the corporations to do their job and to successfully pay for the continued operation, growth, and even expansion of the humanitarian and infrastructure projects, which will be directly beneficial to the beneficiaries and recipients of assistance. At the same time, anywhere from 10 to 15% of the workforce within commercial ventures can be comprised of people with very little training or experience, without any major disruption to productivity or the ability of the commercial operations to produce with minimal disruption. These statistics are from the United States Bureau of Labor and Statistics, and despite a healthy dose of skepticism regarding the government being in order, there would be no benefit to adjusting these numbers for the sake of political expediency. Thus, there's pretty good level of confidence that roughly 10 to 15% of most rudimentary job functions can and should be performed adequately by individuals without expansive training or extensive experience. Further, we have Price's Law, which was formulated by Derek Price, which further asserts that only a small fraction of the total number of contributors in any operation is responsible for a disproportionately large portion of the results. In mathematical terms, this law states that 50% of the work is done by the square root of the total number of people participating in the work. Thus, in a company with 100 employees, Price's Law suggests that approximately 10 employees, the square root of 100, would be responsible for producing 50% of the company's output. This highlights the existence of a core group of highly productive individuals who drive a substantial portion of the organizational success, and this phenomenon is observed across various fields from scientific research and software development to manufacturing and sales. In labor and production context, this is a pretty good indication that productivity is going to be unevenly distributed among workers. A small number of employees often contribute significantly more to the overall output than the majority. This can be due to various factors such as differences in skills, experience, motivation, and even access to resources. It's important to recognize this distribution also, as it allows for managers to better understand the workforce dynamics and to implement strategies to optimize productivity, especially when such a large portion of the workforce is going to be comprised of formerly vulnerable members of society. Understanding this principle can help organizations design workflows and allocate tasks in a manner that capitalizes on the strengths of their most productive employees. Putting these two approaches into practice through the commercial ventures owned by the foundation and adding in the necessary funding for a provision of tools, additional life skills training, and preparing these individuals to accept more well-paid employment opportunities upon the successful completion of training, and even business ownership opportunities for the formerly vulnerable, if continued in practice, should provide an exponential expansion in successful efforts to eradicate poverty, one individual, one family, one community, and even one business at a time. Many of the formerly vulnerable members of society will likely have an acceptable aptitude for the business operations, and through the introduction of life skills training programs and more specific training relevant to their desired pursuits and individual aptitudes, which should ultimately allow for the introduction of the former societally challenged individuals to accept roles in executive, administrative, and even funded business ownership opportunities, we'll see the continued exponential growth and expansion of efforts to eradicate poverty. Such business ownership by the formerly vulnerable members of society will be funded subject to the requirements for hiring 10 to 15% of their primary workforce from among the more vulnerable members of society, providing them with the necessary tools and training, and further encouraging their reintroduction into the societal structure as productive and contributing members of their respective communities. This will inevitably lead to a day when those remaining as vulnerable members of society within any given community will become the aforementioned statistical anomaly. At such a time, the food forest should be in full bloom. The social assistance programs that are no longer subject to strained government assistance programs can be implemented without further burdening the local taxpayers. And when such a day arrives, and to some extent even as that day draws closer, the business ventures can be expanded into the surrounding communities, forcing the spread of programs that will inevitably continue to grow and expand, providing hope, not just homes, providing the requisite training, tools, and paid employment opportunities, and working to fully eradicate poverty within an ever-increasing sphere of influence and area of responsibility and serving as a benefit not only for the individual but for their families and the local communities, and ultimately even for the state itself, expanding to the domestic level as these programs are expanded to the domestic level. So again, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or just want to get involved, let us know. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye. Please like, share, subscribe, and comment below. Music by Hatman.